Excuse me, I said clean this table, are you deaf? The shrill voice cut through the elegant ambiance of Le Bernardin's dining room like nails on a chalkboard. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light across white tablecloths and polished silverware, but the woman's face was anything but soft. Her lips curled in disgust as she jabbed a manicured finger toward the pristine table beside her. I've been waiting for 15 minutes and this mess is still here. She gestured dramatically at 2 empty wine glasses and a dessert plate that hadn't yet been cleared. What kind of establishment allows the help to just stand around doing nothing? My name is Maya, and at 32 years old, I'd learned to recognize that particular tone of voice. The one that assumed. The one that decided who you were before you'd even opened your mouth. I stood perfectly still in my tailored navy suit, my leather portfolio tucked under one arm, watching her performance with detached curiosity. The woman blonde highlights, Botox smooth forehead, diamond tennis bracelet that probably cost more than most people's cars, seemed to vibrate with indignation. Her companion, an equally polished brunette, whispered something that only made her angrier. Don't just stare at me. The blonde's voice rose another octave. I'm a platinum member of this establishment. Do you understand what that means? My husband and I have been dining here for 7 years. 7 years. I noticed the other diners beginning to shift uncomfortably in their seats. A well-dressed couple 2 tables over exchanged meaningful glances. An older gentleman in a Tom Ford suit raised his eyebrows over his wine glass. The sommelier. Marcus, a man I'd met exactly 45 minutes ago. During my walkthrough with the previous owner, stood frozen near the wine cellar entrance, clearly uncertain whether to intervene. I'm going to give you exactly 10 seconds to remove these dishes, the woman continued, her voice dripping with the kind of contempt that came from a lifetime of never being told no. And then I'm calling security to have you removed from this restaurant. People like you shouldn't even be in here, let alone... Mrs. Whitmore. A smooth voice interrupted from behind me. Laurent, the maître d', approached with the practiced calm of someone who'd managed difficult customers for decades. His French accent added gravitas to his words. Perhaps I can assist. Don't assist me, Laurent. I want her out of here. Now. Mrs. Whitmore stood up, her chair scraping against the marble floor. Look at her, just standing there with that smug look on her face. This is exactly what's wrong with the service industry these days. No respect, no standards. Just ... People who don't belong trying to... She stopped mid-sentence as her eyes finally registered what I was holding. Not a tray, not a notepad. A leather portfolio embossed with the logo of Goldman & Associates, one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurant acquisition firms. I watched the micro-expressions flicker across her face. Confusion. Doubt. A brief flash of something that might have been recognition that she'd made a terrible mistake. But entitled people rarely back down when they sense they're losing control of a situation. Instead, they double down. I don't care what you're holding, she hissed, though her voice had lost some of its certainty. You're clearly not dressed appropriately for this establishment. And I'm going to speak to the owner about the kind of people they're letting wander around bothering customers. When Richard hears about this, Richard Castellano? I asked quietly, speaking for the first time. My voice was steady, almost gentle. The previous owner? Previous? Mrs. Whitmore's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. What are you talking about? Richard would never sell Le Bernardin. His family has owned it for 43 years. I finished for her. Yes, I'm aware. We discussed the family history quite extensively during the negotiation process. The color began to drain from her face, but she rallied quickly. Negotiation? Who do you think you are? Some kind of ... inspector. Health department? She said it like an accusation, like I was trying to trick her. Richard would have told me if he was selling to someone like me. I completed her sentence again, this time with the faintest hint of a smile. Someone he wouldn't have expected? The dining room had gone completely silent now. Even the soft classical music playing through hidden speakers seemed to fade into the background. Every diner, every server, every busboy was watching this moment unfold. Mrs. Whitmore's companion tugged at her sleeve, whispering urgently, Sharon, maybe we should... No. Sharon Whitmore pulled her arm away, her face flushing red. I've been coming to this restaurant since before you were probably born. She spat at me. I know everyone here. I know the investors. I know the board members. And I can guarantee you that whatever little game you're playing, it ends right now. Security! She screamed the last word, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Laurent moved closer to me, his expression apologetic. Miss, perhaps if we could speak in the office? No need, I said calmly, opening my portfolio. I think Mrs. Whitmore deserves to understand the situation fully. Right here. Right now. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. The lighting caught the official seal at the top, the signature of Richard Castellano at the bottom. The transfer of ownership legally filed with the state of New York exactly 6 hours ago. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes locked onto the document, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. The red flush on her face deepened to purple. That's not. You can single quotes double quotes, she stammered. I can't what? I asked softly. Own a restaurant? Purchase a Michelin-starred establishment? Stand in my own dining room while you demand I clean your table? The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Mrs. Whitmore's companion slowly pushing back her chair, clearly wanting to distance herself from what was about to happen. Now, I continued, my voice still remarkably gentle considering the rage I could feel building in my chest. Let's discuss what happens next, shall we? If you're enjoying this story of instant karma, you'll definitely want to see how this plays out. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's ending is something you absolutely cannot miss. Mrs. Whitmore's face had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. The entitled superiority had cracked, revealing something uglier underneath pure, desperate fury at losing control. And I hadn't even told her the best part yet. You can't possibly afford this place. Sharon's voice had changed from shrill to something colder, more calculated. She pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Richard would never sell to someone without proper credentials, without the right background. This is clearly some kind of fraud. I watched her type furiously, her acrylic nails clicking against the glass. Her companion had slid several inches away, suddenly very interested in the minimal floral arrangement on their table. I'm calling my husband, Sharon announced loudly, as if the entire dining room needed to witness her power play. He's a partner at Morrison & Lecht. They handle all the major restaurant acquisitions in Manhattan. If there's been any impropriety, any attempt to Morrison & Lecht. I nodded slowly. Yes, they were actually involved in the sale. Junior partner named David something? He handled the preliminary paperwork. Sharon's finger paused over her phone screen. David ... You mean David Whitmore? That would be your husband, I assume? The realization hit her like cold water. Her husband's firm had facilitated the very sale she was now calling fraudulent. I could see her mind racing, trying to find a new angle of attack. People like Sharon Whitmore didn't apologize. They pivoted. Well, that doesn't change the fact that you were standing there pretending to be staff, she snapped, recovering quickly. Clearly trying to deceive customers. That's entrapment or something. I could sue for emotional distress. Laurent stepped forward, his diplomatic training clearly warring with his desire to intervene. Mrs. Whitmore, perhaps if we could offer you a complimentary. I don't want complimentary anything from her. Sharon cut him off, gesturing at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. I want assurances that this restaurant will maintain its standards. That it won't become some ... trendy fusion nonsense that tries to appeal to everyone and ends up appealing to no one. The racism in her words was careful, coded. She'd clearly practiced this particular brand of bigotry, the kind that never quite said the quiet part out loud, but made sure everyone understood exactly what she meant. My mind flashed back to another dining room, 15 years earlier. Me in an actual server's uniform, black pants, white shirt, cheap non-slip shoes that made my feet ache after double shifts. Watching women like Sharon Whitmore snap their fingers at me, complain that their water wasn't cold enough, leave exactly 10% tips with a note about improving my attitude. I'd been 19. Working 3 jobs while taking business classes at night. One of those jobs was at a mid-tier steakhouse where I learned that the color of my skin would always be more visible to certain customers than the quality of my service. Where managers told me to smile more, be less threatening, maybe wear my hair differently. You know what I think? Sharon continued, emboldened by my silence. I think Richard felt pressured to sell to you. Some kind of diversity quota or political correctness nonsense. And now the rest of us are going to suffer because, Mrs. Whitmore. A new voice joined the conversation. An older gentleman from the table near the window had stood up, his distinguished features arranged in clear disapproval. I believe you're making quite a spectacle of yourself. Sharon whirled to face him. Mr. Ashford, surely you understand what I'm trying to. What I understand, he said quietly, walking toward our group with measured steps, is that you've been berating this young woman for the past 10 minutes based on an assumption that says far more about you than it does about her? He nodded respectfully at me. James Ashford. I had the pleasure of dining at your place in Brooklyn last spring. The halibut was extraordinary. My place in Brooklyn. The small 30-seat restaurant I'd built from nothing over 6 years of 16-hour days and bank loans that required my apartment, my car and my sanity as collateral. The one that had earned a Michelin star last year, making me one of the youngest and only black female chefs in New York to achieve that recognition. Sharon's face went through another series of complicated expressions. You own multiple restaurants? Did you think I walked in off the street with a briefcase full of cash? I asked mildly. No, I just ... She was floundering now, trying to find solid ground. Your outfit. You're not dressed like what? I interrupted gently. Like someone who just spent 6 hours in meetings with lawyers and accountants finalizing a $7 million purchase? This is Armani, by the way. In case you were wondering about my standards. The number 7 million seemed to physically stagger her. Her companion made a small squeaking sound. That's impossible, Sharon breathed. No one spends that kind of money without proper financing, due diligence, industry credentials. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're absolutely right, which is why I spent the last 18 months being vetted by Richard's family, the Michelin Organization, the New York Restaurant Association, and 3 separate banks. But please, continue telling me what I can and cannot afford. I pulled out my phone, opening the camera app with deliberate slowness. Actually, do you mind if I record the rest of this conversation? I like to document significant moments in my business journey. And this, you calling security on me in my own restaurant, this feels like something I'll want to. Remember. Sharon's eyes went wide with panic. You can't record me without permission. That's illegal in New York. I know my rights. Actually, Laurent interjected smoothly, New York is a one-party consent state. Miss Maya is perfectly within her rights to record conversations she's participating in. The Mater D's intervention seemed to be the final straw. Sharon grabbed her purse, her hands shaking with rage. This is unacceptable. When Richard hears about this treatment, when my husband hears how you've humiliated me. Your husband already knows, I said quietly. He's actually the one who suggested Le Bernardin when I was looking for my next acquisition. Said it would be perfect for my expansion plans. We had lunch just last Tuesday. The color that flooded Sharon's face was no longer embarrassment or anger. It was pure, unadulterated shock. Her husband had facilitated this. Had probably known for weeks, and hadn't told her. You're lying, she whispered, but the certainty had drained from her voice. Am I? I tilted my head slightly. Feel free to call him and ask. I'll wait. Sharon's fingers trembled as she clutched her phone. Around us, I could feel the other diners' attention, their phones discreetly angled to capture this moment. In the age of social media, Karen encounters didn't stay private for long. But Sharon wasn't done yet. People like her never went down without trying to burn everything around them first. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. You think you've won something here? She hissed, low enough that only our small group could hear. You think buying one restaurant makes you belong in this world? I know everyone who matters in this city. Every critic, every investor, every socialite who fills tables like these. One word from me and this place will be empty within a month. Your little Brooklyn star won't mean anything when Manhattan's elite knows you're running the kitchen. There it was. The real threat. Not physical, not legal, but social and economic. The promise to destroy my business through whisper campaigns and social exile. And that's when I knew Sharon Whitmore had no idea who she was really dealing with. Sharon's threat hung in the air like smoke. Around us, the dining room had transformed into something resembling a theater, 50 well-dressed witnesses pretending not to watch while capturing every word on their devices. I met her gaze steadily, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. Then I smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that comes from knowing something the other person doesn't. You know what's interesting about threats, Mrs. Whitmore? I said softly. They only work when the person making them has more power than the person receiving them. I just told you. I know everyone in this city who matters. Sharon insisted, though her voice had lost some of its earlier venom. One phone call to Margot Chen at the Times, and your little restaurant dreams are finished? Margot Chen? I nodded thoughtfully. Excellent food critic. Incredibly influential. You must be very close. We're on the board of the Met Gala committee together, Sharon said, lifting her chin. She values my opinion on which restaurants deserve attention and which ones are just passing trends. That's fascinating, I said. Because Margot and I had coffee this morning. Sharon's confidence flickered. You're lying. She would have mentioned what? That she was meeting with the chef who just purchased Le Bernardin? The story she's been working on for the past 3 weeks about the youngest black female chef to own multiple Michelin-starred restaurants in Manhattan? I paused. Or did you mean she should have asked your permission first? The color drained from Sharon's face, but I wasn't finished. She'd be publishing the piece on Wednesday, actually. Front page of the dining section, complete with a photo spread of the renovations I'm planning. Should be quite the exposure. Laurent, who had remained diplomatically silent, allowed himself the smallest smile. Mr. Ashford, still standing nearby, raised his wine glass in a subtle salute. Sharon's companion finally found her voice. Sharon, maybe we should just... No. Sharon's hands clenched into fists. I don't care what arrangements you've made. There are other critics. Other publications. Philippe Dubois at Le Guide, for instance. He's been reviewing fine dining for 30 years, and he absolutely despises gimmicks and publicity stunts. When he hears about this circus, you mean when he arrives for the private tasting I'm hosting tomorrow night? I interrupted again. Philippe RSVP'd last week. He's bringing Jean-Marc Rousseau from Etoile. They're both very curious about my interpretation of Richard's signature bouillabaisse. Each revelation was like watching a Jenga tower lose another critical piece. Sharon swayed slightly, gripping the back of her chair. This is impossible, she whispered. You can't have... All of this couldn't have been arranged so quickly. Unless ... I could see her mind working. Trying to find a conspiracy that made sense. Trying to explain how someone she'd assumed was staff could have orchestrated what I'd orchestrated. Unless what? I asked pleasantly. Unless I've been planning this for over a year? Meeting with Richard's family, building relationships with critics and culinary organizations, securing financing from investors who actually care about talent over pedigree? I tilted my head. You're right. That would require a level of professionalism and preparation you clearly don't think I'm capable of. The restaurant's front door opened, letting in a gust of October air. A woman in her 60s entered, elegant in a charcoal Chanel suit, her silver hair cut in a sharp bob. Her eyes swept the room with the practiced assessment of someone used to evaluating spaces and people in seconds. Laurent straightened immediately. Mrs. Castellano, good evening. We weren't expecting. I was having dinner nearby when Richard called. The woman said, her voice carrying the faint trace of an Italian accent. She walked directly toward our group, her heels clicking purposefully against the marble. He said there might be some ... complications with the transition. Sharon seized on this like a lifeline. Mrs. Castellano, thank goodness you're here. This woman has been incredibly rude, and I was just explaining to her that Le Bernardin has standards. A reputation that needs to be Mrs. Whitmore. Isabella Castellano interrupted, her tone icy. I've known you for 7 years. In that time, you've sent back 14 perfectly prepared dishes, reduced 3 servers to tears, and consistently treated our staff as though they exist solely for your entertainment. Sharon's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. When my husband told me he was selling to Maya, Isabella continued, I was relieved. Finally, someone who understands that excellence in this business comes from talent and dedication, not from membership in the right country clubs. But, Richard said, you both said family legacy was important, Sharon stammered. It is important, Isabella agreed. Which is why we chose carefully. Maya spent 6 months dining here, studying our techniques, learning our history. She knows more about this restaurant's legacy than most of our regulars. Her gaze sharpened. Including you, who only comes here to be seen, never to actually appreciate the food. Mr. Ashford chuckled softly from his position near the window. Several other diners had stopped pretending not to listen entirely. Sharon's face had progressed through so many shades of red and white that I was genuinely concerned she might be having a medical event. Her companion had stood up, clearly preparing to flee. I want to speak to Richard, Sharon demanded, her voice cracking. Right now. He'll explain that this is all some misunderstanding. That Isabella pulled out her phone, tapped the screen twice, and held it out. Be my guest. Sharon grabbed the phone like it was a weapon. We all waited as the call connected, as Richard Castellano's voice came through the speaker. Isabella? Is everything? It's Sharon Whitmore, Richard. I'm at the restaurant, and there's been a terrible mistake. This woman claiming to own La Bernardine, she's been recording me, threatening me, and... Mrs. Whitmore. Richard's voice was weary, like he'd had this conversation before, and hoped he'd never have to have it again. Maya Renee owns La Bernardine. She purchased it legally, with proper financing and credentials that frankly exceed what we required. The sale was finalized this morning. But you can't just sell to someone. Without double quotes, Sharon was grasping now, desperate. What about the other investors? The board? Surely they have some say in. I am the board, Richard said simply. And I chose Maya because she's brilliant, dedicated, and represents the future of fine dining in this city. Now I suggest you apologize to her and leave before you embarrass yourself further. The silence that followed was deafening. Sharon thrust the phone back at Isabella, as if it had burned her. Her hands were shaking visibly now, her carefully applied makeup starting to streak from the sweat gathering at her temples. I won't be spoken to this way, she managed, but the words had no force behind them. My husband will hear about this. My attorney. Everyone I know will know how I was treated here. Please do tell everyone, I said quietly. Tell them how you screamed at the new owner to clean your table. How you threatened to have me thrown out of my own restaurant. How you assumed, based purely on how I look, that I couldn't possibly belong here. I gestured at the dozens of phones still recording around us. I'm sure social media would love to hear your side of things. Sharon's eyes widened as she finally registered all those cameras, all those witnesses. In the modern age, there was no controlling a narrative once it escaped into the wild. Her threat to destroy my reputation through whispers had just become a sword hanging over her own head. You planned this, she hissed. This whole thing was a setup to humiliate me. No, I corrected gently. I planned to have a quiet walkthrough of my new restaurant. You decided to provide the entertainment. Isabella Castellano placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that wasn't lost on anyone watching. Maya, if you need me to make a statement to the press about Richard's confidence in your abilities, I'm happy to. That won't be necessary, I said, though I appreciated the offer. But thank you. Sharon gathered her purse with trembling hands, her companion already halfway to the door. But before leaving, she turned back one final time, her face a mask of barely contained rage. This isn't over, she said, low and venomous. You may have fooled Richard and his wife, but I know people who will look into your background, your financing, everything. And when they find something, because there's always something, everyone will know that you didn't earn this. That you don't deserve it. She swept toward the exit, her heels hammering against the floor like gunshots. I watched her go, my expression calm. What Sharon didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that every threat she'd just made,
every connection she'd referenced, every powerful person she planned to unleash on me, ... I'd already anticipated them all. And I had receipts that would make her wish she'd simply apologized when she had the chance.
The storm hit exactly 48 hours later. I was in Le Bernardin's kitchen, reviewing prep schedules with my new sous chef, when Laurent appeared in the doorway with an expression I couldn't quite read. Miss Maya, you have ... visitors. Several of them. The dining room had transformed into an impromptu tribunal.
5 people sat at the largest table, their body language radiating authority and judgment.
I recognized 2 immediately. David Whitmore, Sharon's husband, looking deeply uncomfortable in his Brooks Brothers suit, and a severe woman in her 50s who could only be Constance Morrison, senior partner at his law firm. The others introduced themselves with the weary formality of people forced into an unpleasant task.
Gregory Chun, president of the New York Restaurant Association.
Patricia Ashford, no relation to James, apparently from the Michelin Guide's American office. And finally, Thomas Bennett, a health inspector whose presence suggested Sharon had pulled every string she could find. Ms. Maya Renee, Constance began, arranging papers in front of her with precise movements. We've received serious allegations regarding improprieties in your acquisition of this establishment. Mrs. Sharon Whitmore has provided sworn
testimony that you engaged in deceptive practices, harassment of customers, and threatened her with illegal recording.
I poured myself a glass of water from the pitcher Laurent had quietly placed on a nearby table. Interesting. And what evidence supports these allegations? David Whitmore finally looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time.
The guilt on his face was almost comical.
Maya, I tried to tell Sharon this was unnecessary, but she insisted. Your wife filed an official complaint with the Restaurant Association, Gregory Chun interrupted, his tone neutral. We're required to investigate all claims of misconduct, regardless of their ... origin. Of course. I sat down across from them, perfectly calm. I appreciate your thoroughness. Shall we review the evidence? Constance slid a folder across the table.
Inside were printed screenshots, social media posts, text messages, even grainy photos clearly taken from a distance.
Someone had been busy. These show you verbally attacking Mrs. Whitmore in front of dozens of witnesses, Constance said, deliberately humiliating her, recording her without consent,
and leveraging your relationship with the Castellanos to what? I interrupted gently. To purchase a restaurant legally? To stand in my own establishment while being screamed at?
Mrs. Whitmore claims you were intentionally deceptive about your identity, Patricia Ashford from Michelin said, her accent crisp.
That you allowed her to believe you were staff in order to create a confrontational situation.
I pulled out my phone, setting it on the table. Would you like to see what actually happened?
I have the complete interaction.
23 minutes of unedited footage from multiple angles. The group exchanged glances. Constance's jaw tightened. We've reviewed Mrs. Whitmore's video evidence, which starts midway through the encounter, I noted.
After she'd already spent 10 minutes berating me. Convenient editing, wouldn't you say?
I opened my phone and pressed play. The video began with me entering the dining room for the first time. Portfolio clearly visible, Laurent greeting me by name. Then Sharon's voice, unmistakable. Excuse me? I said, clean this table. We watched in silence, all 23 minutes.
Sharon's escalating aggression, her racial coding, her threats.
Her husband's firm mentioned David Whitmore's face grew progressively more pale. The moment she screamed for security.
Isabella Castellano's arrival and quiet devastation of Sharon's position. When it ended, nobody spoke.
I also have testimonies, I continued, sliding my own folder across the table. From 17 current and former Le Bernardin staff members, detailing Mrs. Whitmore's behavior over 7 years.
The servers she made cry. The racist comments.
The complaints that were never officially filed because management was afraid of losing a platinum member. Laurent had compiled them all. Every incident carefully documented with dates.
witnesses, and in 3 cases, previous recordings that staff had kept as insurance. Gregory Chen flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with each one.
Why wasn't any of this reported to the association? Because the Castellanos were old school, I said.
They believed in handling problems quietly, preserving the restaurant's reputation above all else. But I'm not old school.
I believe in documentation. Thomas Bennett, the health inspector, cleared his throat.
Mrs. Whitmore also claimed there were health code violations being concealed, which is why I'm here. The kitchen passed inspection yesterday with perfect marks, I said.
I assume you'll want to verify that yourself, but you won't find anything.
I've been running Michelin-starred kitchens for 6 years.
I don't cut corners. Patricia Ashford leaned forward, studying me carefully. You seem remarkably prepared for this meeting.
I've been preparing for this meeting since the moment Sharon Whitmore walked out of my restaurant threatening to destroy me, I replied. People like her don't make empty threats.
They follow through. So I made sure I had everything I needed to defend myself. This is ridiculous, Constance Morrison snapped, but her conviction had weakened. You can't possibly have anticipated every single one of her connections, I smiled. Yes, I could. Because Sharon Whitmore is predictable.
She filed complaints with the Restaurant Association, contacted the Michelin Guide, sent her husband to intimidate me legally, and even called in a health inspection, hoping to find violations. Did I miss anything? The silence was answer enough. I pulled out one more document. This is a letter from the New York Commission on Human Rights. They're very interested in Sharon Whitmore's pattern of discriminatory behavior.
Turns out, 17 staff testimonies about racial harassment make for a compelling case. David Whitmore's head dropped into his hands.
Oh God, your wife's complaints about me are going to trigger an investigation, I continued.
But not into me.
Into whether Le Bernardin, under previous management, fostered an environment where customers felt empowered to abuse staff based on race. The Castellanos will be questioned. Former employees will testify, and Sharon's name will be attached to all of it. You're using the system against her,
Constance said. But there was something like respect in her voice now. I'm using the system exactly as it's designed to be used, I corrected. To protect people from discrimination and abuse. Sharon just assumed the system would never be turned on someone like her.
Gregory Chen closed the folder of testimonies, his expression grim.
Mrs. Morrison, I think we've seen enough.
The association will be dismissing Mrs. Whitmore's complaint.
Additionally, we'll be conducting our own review into customer harassment policies at member establishments. Patricia Ashford nodded. Michelin has no concerns about Ms. Maya's ownership. In fact, we're quite pleased to see Le Bernardin in such capable hands. Thomas Bennett stood.
I'll file my inspection report today.
No violations found. Miss Maya, your kitchen is impeccable. One by one they gathered their materials and left, all except David Whitmore, who sat motionless, staring at the table.
She's going to lose everything, isn't she?
He asked quietly. Her social standing, her reputation. Our friends. That depends, I said. Is she capable of learning from this?
Of understanding that actions have consequences? He laughed bitterly. You don't know Sharon. She never admits she was wrong.
She just find new enemies to blame. He stood, adjusting his tie.
For what it's worth, I told her not to do this. I told her you were exactly who you claimed to be, that the sale was legitimate.
But she couldn't accept that someone she judged as less than could own what she considered hers by social right. That sounds like a personal problem, I observed. It's about to become a very public one. He agreed. The partners at Morrison and Lecht are already asking questions about my judgment. About why I didn't disclose my wife's history with Le Bernardin before facilitating the sale. He paused at the door.
I won't be able to protect her from what's coming.
After he left, Lauren appeared with a glass of champagne. I took the liberty, he said, the faintest smile on his lips. That was ... masterful. It was necessary, I corrected, but I accepted the glass.
People like Sharon Whitmore have been dining out on their privilege for too long.
Sometimes the table needs to be cleared. My phone buzzed.
A text from Margot Chen of The Times, publishing tomorrow instead of Wednesday. Too good to wait.
Hope you're ready for the attention. I looked around Le Bernardine's elegant dining room, mine now, fully and legally. The chandeliers glittered overhead. The tables were set for evening service. And somewhere out there, Sharon Whitmore was about to learn that the world she'd always controlled was no longer hers to command. If you're invested in seeing justice served properly, you won't want to miss how this transforms everything. Make sure you're following along for the conclusion, because karma isn't finished with Sharon Whitmore yet. The best part? This was just the beginning of her education in consequences. The New York Times article dropped at 6 a.m. the next morning. By 7 a.m., it had been shared 40,000 times. By 9 a.m., Sharon Whitmore's name was trending on 3 different social media platforms, and none of it was flattering. I was reviewing invoices in my office when Laurent knocked, carrying his tablet with an expression that managed to be both professional and deeply satisfied. "You should see this," he said, turning the screen toward me. Margot Chun's article was everything I'd hoped for and more. The headline alone was devastating. Rising star chef purchases Le Bernardin amid shocking display of customer racism. Below it, a split-screen photo. Me in my chef's whites at my Brooklyn restaurant, and Sharon Whitmore's face contorted with rage, clearly captured from one of the dining room videos. The article laid it out methodically. My journey from server to chef to owner. The year-long negotiation with the Castellanos. Sharon's explosive confrontation, complete with quotes from witnesses. The 17 staff testimonies about her pattern of behavior. The Commission on Human Rights investigation. But Margot hadn't stopped there. She'd interviewed other restaurant owners, other staff members from different establishments. A picture emerged of Sharon Whitmore as the embodiment of everything toxic about fine dining culture. The entitlement, the casual cruelty, the assumption that money bought the right to abuse. "The comments section is remarkable," Laurent observed, scrolling down. "Over 3,000 already, and I haven't found a single one defending her." My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Texts from fellow chefs offering congratulations. Calls from investors suddenly interested in my expansion plans. Emails from journalists wanting interviews. Even a message from James Ashford, the gentleman who defended me that first night. Brava! The industry needed this reckoning. But the most satisfying message came from an unknown number at 11 a.m. "This is Jessica Martinez. I was a server at Le Bernardin 3 years ago. Mrs. Whitmore made me cry in the bathroom after calling me stupid in front of my whole section. I quit the industry because of people like her. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for making it matter." There were dozens more like it. Stories from servers, hosts, busboys, all the invisible people who'd absorbed Sharon's cruelty because they had no power to fight back. Now, watching her fall, they finally felt seen. The social consequences were swift and brutal. By noon, the Met Gala committee had quietly removed Sharon from the board. Her name disappeared from the Lincoln Center donor list. 3 charity organizations she'd been involved with issued statements about aligning with our values. Even her country club, the bastion of old money and older prejudices, was reportedly holding emergency meetings about her membership. David Whitmore filed for divorce on Friday. Sharon's friends, those perfectly coiffed women who'd lunched with her and shared her disdain for anyone they deemed beneath them, evaporated like morning mist. In the brutal calculus of Manhattan social circles, association with Sharon had become toxic. Better to pretend you'd never known her than risk guilt by proximity. The Commission on Human Rights investigation expanded beyond Le Bernardin. Other restaurants came forward with complaints about Sharon's behavior. The pattern was undeniable. Years of racist comments, degrading treatment of staff, threats to destroy careers if she wasn't appeased. 2 weeks after the article published, I received another message. This one from Richard Castellano. "Isabella and I saw her yesterday. She was eating alone at a midtown chain restaurant. She looked broken. Part of me feels sorry for her. But then I remember how many people she hurt, and I don't." I understood the sentiment. There was no joy in watching someone's life disintegrate, even someone who'd spent years making others miserable. But this wasn't about Sharon Whitmore anymore. It was about accountability. About the message sent to every entitled customer who thought their money bought them the right to abuse service workers. Le Bernardin thrived under my ownership.
The publicity from the incident actually increased our reservations.
People wanted to dine at the restaurant where a black female chef had stood her ground and won.
Philippe Dubois gave our reopening a glowing review. Jean-Marc Rousseau from Etoile brought colleagues to experience what he called a new era of fine dining excellence.
3 months later, we earned our second Michelin star. I hired back 2 of the servers Sharon had traumatized during her reign of terror.
Laurent reported that staff morale had never been higher. For the first time in years, people felt safe reporting problem customers, knowing management would support them instead of sacrificing them to preserve platinum memberships. My Brooklyn restaurant expanded into the space next door. The investors I'd worried might disappear after the controversy had instead doubled down.
Excited by the values I represented, one of them told me, "You didn't just buy a restaurant. You started a movement." That felt too grandiose, but I understood what he meant. The industry was finally having conversations about the culture of abuse that had been normalized for decades.
About the racism that went unchallenged when it came from wealthy customers.
About the difference between service and servitude. 6 months after that first confrontation, I was featured on the cover of Food and Wine magazine. The interview asked about Sharon Whitmore, about whether I felt vindicated.
"I don't think about vindication," I'd answered honestly. "I think about the young servers who see what happened and realize they don't have to accept abuse. I think about the aspiring chefs who see someone who looks like them owning a Michelin-starred restaurant and think maybe they can too." Sharon Whitmore was just one person. But the system that protected her, that enabled her, that told people like me to stay quiet and know our place, that's what needed to change. On a Tuesday evening in March, almost a year after I'd purchased Le Bernardin, I was doing what I loved most, cooking. The dinner rush was in full swing, my team moving in the synchronized dance of a professional kitchen at peak performance. I plated the final element of a deconstructed bouillabaisse, my interpretation of Richard's
signature dish, and watched it disappear through the kitchen doors.
Laurent returned moments later with a rare smile. "Table 7 requests to speak with the chef." I wiped my hands, adjusted my whites, and stepped into the dining room.
The space still took my breath away sometimes. The elegance, the history, the weight of legacy I now carried.
But it didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like home. At table 7 sat a young black woman, maybe 23, wearing a crisp interview suit. Her mother sat beside her, both of them beaming.
"Chef Maya," the mother said, standing.
"I had to bring my daughter here tonight. She just got accepted to the Culinary Institute. She's been following your journey since the Times article. You inspired her to apply." The young woman looked at me with shining eyes. I was working at a diner, and customers would say things ... I almost gave up. Then I saw what you did. How you didn't let anyone make you small. And I thought, if she can own Le Bernardin, maybe I can make it too. I felt something catch in my throat. This was why it had mattered.
Not the revenge, not Sharon's downfall, but this moment. This young woman who saw possibility where she'd once seen only barriers. "You can make it," I told her.
"Just remember, document everything. Stand your ground. And never let anyone convince you that you don't belong in spaces you've earned the right to occupy." As I walked back to my kitchen, I thought about Sharon Whitmore one last time. She'd assumed I was staff because she couldn't imagine someone like me owning something like this.
She'd tried to have me thrown out of my own restaurant.
And in doing so, she'd given me the most valuable gift, proof that the old guard's grip on power was finally slipping. The best revenge isn't just success. It's building something so undeniable, so excellent, that the people who tried to destroy you have no choice but to watch you rise. It's creating opportunities for those who come after you, so they don't have to fight the same battles you did.
Sharon learned to clean her own tables, eventually. I heard she moved to Florida, away from the social circles she'd once dominated.
Away from the restaurants where her name had become synonymous with everything wrong with elite dining culture. I learned that standing up to bullies doesn't just protect you. It protects everyone who comes after. And every time someone calls me chef, every time I see my name on the Michelin list, every time a young person tells me I inspired them, I remember that woman screaming at me to clean her table, and I smile, because I did clean things up. Just not in the way she expected. If this story moved you, Share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up to injustice is always worth it. And remember, the people who underestimate you today are writing the story of your triumph tomorrow. Subscribe to hear more stories about justice, karma, and the sweet satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. Because in the end, excellence is the best revenge, and success is the sweetest silence.